Welcome to Integrative Nurse Coaches in Action, the podcast where nurses, healthcare professionals, and consumers come to hear from inspirational nurse leaders in health and wellness coaching. We cover the latest innovations, ideas, and breakthroughs from nurses who are shifting the paradigm of disease care to health care through the art and science of nurse coaching.
Many nurses are turning to addiction of alcohol, drugs, food, and exercise to numb the deep pain they feel because of cumulative caretaking trauma, personal trauma, grief, suffering, and the stress of our workplaces. It's a taboo subject since nurses are known as the most ethically sound and trusted profession, so they're held to the highest of public standards. Taking action to talk about this subject is vulnerable and courageous. And this is exactly what Inca alumni Kacie Salas is doing in her work as an integrative nurse coach. She's passionate about creating safe spaces for nurses and women to gather to explore how cumulative caretaking trauma and personal trauma affect nurses' mental, spiritual, and physical well-being. Kacie speaks openly about her personal journey and how healing modalities and integrative nurse coaching will support and heal our communities. Before we get to today's podcast, let's take 3 deep breaths in and out together. 1, 2, 3. Now, we're ready. Kacie Salas is a board-certified, holistic, integrative nurse coach. She helps women heal from anxiety, trauma, and addiction through subconscious work to feel more grounded, joyous, and safe in their body with a regulated nervous system. She's overcome a tremendous amount of trauma and grief in her own life, and she's also suffered from addiction and anxiety. Through using subconscious healing, Kacie learned to transform her life using hypnosis, timeline therapy, EFT, Reiki, and breathwork. Her mission is to help you integrate these tools into your life so you feel empowered and embody your highest self. Learning new coping mechanisms to manage your anxiety, overcome trauma, and addiction is possible. Kacie also provides psychological first aid and emotional wellness to nurses on the front line as a debriefing facilitator with Debriefing the Frontline's nonprofit organization.
Welcome, everyone, to the Integrative Nurse Coaches in Action podcast. My name is Nicole Viano. I am your host, and I'm also a board-certified integrative nurse coach. And I have the pleasure of welcoming an exciting guest to the podcast today, all the way from Calpine, California, where I guess there's only 300 people in Calpine, California. However, one of the best parts about being a nurse coach is that our reach can extend far and wide. So we're welcoming Kacie Salas. She is a debriefing facilitator with Debriefing the Frontline. She also has a private practice, and her main focus is on helping women with trauma, addiction, and sobriety support. So this is going to be a fascinating and much needed conversation. So I'm very, very happy to welcome Kacie Salas.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm so happy to be here. This is very exciting. Thank you.
It is exciting. It's always so wonderful for me to connect with fellow integrative nurse coaches in action, all graduates from the Integrative Nurse Coach Academy. And so we love to take a little trip down history lane and discover why you became a nurse.
Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking about that question today. Well, I think about that question often, actually. And I think that I kind of always wanted to be a nurse. I've always kind of been a caretaker. And I remember in high school, I must have been, a sophomore, maybe, I did a program where you could go into the hospital, and actually the hospitals that I work at now, small community hospital, and I went in and shadowed different nurses and people around the hospital that did different kinds of jobs. And I was like, I want to be a nurse. This is it. This is what I want to do. And I actually work at that hospital now in my hometown. So
That's really cool.
yeah.
Yeah. What was it like as a young girl to be shadowing and going to see what's going on, following nurses around?
It was really fun, and it just seemed exciting. And like I said, I've always been a natural caretaker, and it seemed sort of, I don't know, the natural path is to go into nursing. And I shadowed a nurse in the ICU, and I feel like I always kind of had wanted to be an ICU nurse. It just really kind of hit me home there. And interestingly enough, the nurse that I shadowed way back when in high school, 20 plus years ago, I actually worked bedside with her in that ICU when I came to the hospital there, which is pretty wild to think about.
So wild to think about. How cool is that, though?
Yeah. And I never really imagined that I'd be, living in my little hometown of, not in Calpine, but in Truckee. That's where I work at the community hospital, and, serving my community. I never imagined that I would end up back there, but I love serving my community and taking care of, people that I grew up with, people that I know, and just my community in general.
Mm. So you mentioned intensive care. Tell us a little bit about your journey and in where you arrived.
Sure. So I started college in San Francisco and then ended up moving to New York City. And I went to nursing school in New York City. I went to Hunter College in Manhattan. And then I went to nursing school in Staten Island at Wagner College. And so small town girl goes to New York City, which was also quite the experience. I had to get as far away from home as possible, I thought at the time. And it was a wonderful experience and very different from, how I grew up and where I lived, to be in one of the biggest cities in the United States. So I was there for 4 years, graduated nursing school, and I had accepted a job. I realized I wanted to come home, that I didn't want to stay in New York. So I accepted a job near home at a trauma center and as a new grad, and went straight into their cardiac ICU and was an open heart surgery trained nurse taking care of cardiac patients. Yeah, I was there for 3 years. And then I ended up coming to the hospital that I work at now in my hometown, small community hospital. Again, a big change from going from a big trauma center to a little tiny 25-bed hospital. So I've been at Tahoe Forest Hospital for 15 years now. I worked in their ICU for 8 years, and I am currently now a break nurse. I work part-time, and I cover breaks in PACU, ICU, med-surg, and labor and delivery. And I know a lot of people don't have break nurses unless you're from California. So it is a pretty special thing, a pretty special job. I know a lot of people are grateful for the break nurse. And I love it because I'm trained in all departments. And it was just kind of a nice change from full-time ICU to go and be able to still go into the ICU, but not be there all the time and be able to gain a bunch of different skills going all over the hospital.
Mm. Yeah, and it shows your resilience, shows your creativity, shows your ability to put yourself into a position where nurses are really needing you, because nurses are needing a break.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about that, because you're right. A lot of other states have no idea what a break nurse is, and it sounds like something that all nursing facilities should have across the nation.
Yeah. So when I first started nursing, I was in Nevada, and they don't have break nurses or ratios or any of those things. So when I came to California about 10 years ago, I think is when they started bringing that in, ratios and, state mandates for breaks. You had to have a break and you had to have somebody designated to do your break. So the role that I'm in now was a job that was created, like I said, about 10 years ago. And I've been doing that now for 8 years, I think. And yeah, so I go to all these different units and give the nurse their break. Another fun fact is I've worked night shift my entire career. So I'm going into my 18th year of nursing, and I've always been a night shift nurse. I'm one of those wild women that prefers night shift. And, now that I'm a nurse coach, looking back on my journey, I essentially kind of have a nurse coach role in the hospital too, as giving breaks, like it's a lot of kind of emotional support of like everybody in the whole hospital, right? By the time you go to take your break, you're kind of ready to take your break, or maybe something's going on. And it's almost a nurse coaching role in the hospital now that I think of it, which is pretty cool.
It is very cool. Yeah, very cool. So you had an interesting journey starting off as a young girl, knowing that you really wanted to help people, and then doing some shadowing in the hospital, and then ending up moving across the country. Small girl going to a huge city, Manhattan. Oh my goodness. And then doing your schooling, and then eventually returning more closer to home, and then eventually coming back to your hometown, meeting up with the nurse you followed when you were in high school, and then getting this new job as a break nurse. And now you've brought up nurse coaching. So we have to know the story about how you discovered it, what drew you to it. And yeah, let's start with that.
I have a really fun story about that too, actually. So in 2020, when the pandemic hit, I'd been a nurse for 14, 15 years, had some burnout at that point, and then the pandemic hit, which was obviously very hard for all of us. And I actually knew nothing about nurse coaching at all. And I saw a giveaway on Facebook to win tuition to the program. And I thought, well, I'm just going to enter it. Why not? So I entered this giveaway and I won. I won the giveaway. And then of course I, played all the tapes in my head. I don't have enough time to do this. I have 3 young children. I'm working, part-time. I don't have time to do this. And then I thought, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. And it was honestly the best decision I have ever made, and has completely changed the course of my life as a nurse, as a human. It has really changed me. And I never thought that I would be where I am now in my nursing career. And it really ignited, a sense of passion and joy, and brought that back into nursing for me.
And it started with a little bit of joy too, because you won. You won something. That's exciting. And at the time, you probably didn't truly know what you were winning.
I didn't really. I looked at it a little bit, and, I think I won out of 2,000 people that entered. It was a lot. It was a lot of people entered it. And so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do this. And, I've been on my own healing journey for quite a long time, many years. And I'm not new to, self-exploration and healing in general, physically, emotionally, all those things. But the nurse coaching program, as you know, there's a lot of self-reflection when you first start that program too.
Yes. And you mentioned it changed your life. So tell us more about that. How did it change your life, or what were some key things that you recall?
I think the biggest thing is just feeling like I was feeling burned out. And I've always had a more holistic approach to life. And, over the course of, I guess, since having kids, really, my oldest is 9, I've really been more into a holistic approach to life, a more integrative approach to life and healing and wellness and energy medicine, all of that kind of stuff. So when I found nurse coaching, like I said, I had no idea really what nurse coaching was. And then as I went through the program, it really just opened my eyes to this whole new modern world of nursing, essentially. I mean, I think that's really what nurse coaching is it's modern advanced practice nursing. That's what I believe it to be.
Yeah, I feel that too. We all go to nursing school to learn the ways and tools and philosophies and practices of nursing. And then nurse coaching adds a whole other layer to support the foundation of nursing. And I like how you describe that as it being a more modern approach. I also want to just touch back on the decision you had to make. You won something, and then you said, I played the script, the story of, oh, I don't have time. I have, so much going on, my kids, all of that. And yet you still said, you know what, I'm still going to do this, see what this is all about.
Yeah, I think they kind of just took it as a sign from the universe, honestly. Here, you won this. Go follow through. And I've always been very into that, trying to lean into my intuition and trust my gut and trust things as they come to me. And even though I was kind of questioning, do I have enough time to do this? What will I do with it once I complete it? I really felt that there was a bigger plan, for me from the universe. And I went with it. And I think it really brought me back to being a healer. I think that all nurses are healers, and that's what we go into nursing to do, is to be a healer, right? And through modern medicine and just the time that I've been a nurse, 18 years, it's changed so much, and corporate healthcare systems and stuff like that, and it's kind of taken away that basic healing aspect of nursing. So I love that in nurse coaching you really step into that role of being a healer.
Yes, bringing us back to our roots.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So then you took the whole course, which is a in-depth, huge time dedication and mind dedication, and then went through practicum, doing all your practice coaching, graduated. You have your nurse coach board certification. So you're board certified. And then tell us what happened after that.
So I had decided, even while I was in the nurse coaching program, that I was going to start my own business. I knew nothing about business at all, as most nurses don't. And I just went for it anyways. I thought, what do I have to lose? I have all these skills, my nursing background, nurse coaching, and knew I needed a little help in starting my business. So that's what I did. I, hired a business coach and started my business, my nurse coaching business. Going back to, when I first started nursing, I, had a series of traumatic events very early on in my nursing career. My mom and my sister both passed away. They were both hit by cars within 2 years of each other and killed. And that was obviously a very transformative time in my life. And that changed my life also. And so I really wanted to focus on working with women that struggle with trauma, anxiety, and also addiction, because that was part of my journey too. Is after I had lost my mom and my sister, I struggled myself with addiction. And so I knew that I could help other women with that. And I thought that I could use my nurse coaching business to do that. And that's what's amazing about nurse coaching, is there's so many different ways that you could take it. And like I said, I didn't have any idea what I was going to do with it really when I first started. And then as I worked through the program and graduated, I realized that I could, that I was very passionate about helping women that had been through similar experiences as me.
Thank you for sharing that part, that deep part of your journey. We would love to know your mom's name and your sister's name to bring them into this.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, my mom's name was Sally and my sister's name was Melissa. And yeah, both of them saw me graduate nursing school 18 years ago. So
yes. Well, thank you for bringing them into our podcast.
Thank you.
Yes. And so with this, experiencing such deep trauma, coupled with working in an environment that's also potentially very traumatic for many of us, or I shouldn't say potentially, it is traumatic for all of us. And then, your journey with, I'm going to say, coping from the deep loss of your mom and your sister, and then also working at the same time, likely. So tell us a little bit about that journey and then how you're connecting it to nurse coaching.
Yeah. So experiencing all of that, like I said, I was coping, drinking and using drugs. And I got sober in 2011. And was sober for 5 years and had a relapse, and then got sober again in 2020, actually, February of 2020, right before the pandemic hit, which was also an act of the universe, honestly. So yeah, sobriety has been a big part of my journey. And I'm always really honest about that too. Relapse was a part of my journey. And yeah, I started to realize that I was working in a very traumatic environment, and then also experiencing personal trauma too, which, most likely led to the deep burnout that I was having, right before the pandemic hit. So yeah, nurse coaching really brought me back to my roots and brought me back to being what I really envisioned was a healer and helping people the way that I wanted to. So I really use an integrative approach with my clients. I use EFT tapping, emotional freedom technique with my clients. That's been a big tool for myself and for my clients. I use subconscious healing. So I use NLP and hypnosis with my clients also. And those tools have been super transformative in my own life, and then also in my clients' life too.
Yeah. So you have very distinct techniques and tools that you're using within your practice. And I know that you also, so you have your practice, your individual practice, and then you also are working with debriefing the front lines.
Yes.
What would you like to share about that?
So I think just leaning back into that, following the universe and trusting my intuition and letting things flow to me. I was in my nurse coaching cohort, right? One of the nurses in my cohort said that a friend of hers, a previous professor, was starting a nonprofit called Debriefing the Front Lines, and she had connected me with her. And so we connected, and Debriefing the Front Lines is a nurse-led mental health care nonprofit. And we support nurses by providing psychological first aid and emotional wellness to nurses that are struggling with cumulative caretaking trauma. So again, this path was kind of something I didn't see coming at me at all. When I started my business, I kind of was looking at it as a way to exit the hospital, exit the traditional role of nursing. And I never thought I would enjoy working with nurses so much. So that was kind of something that the universe just kind of led me and said, come this way and follow this nudge. And I ended up working with Debriefing the Front Lines as a debriefing facilitator. And that has brought me so much joy too, and has really been just as much of a healing journey as doing the nurse coaching program. The work in itself is so healing for me to be able to support my fellow nurses in that way.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
Hi, I'm Bridget Sager, course creator of Functional Medicine for Nurses, offered by the Integrative Nurse Coach Academy in partnership with the Institute for Functional Medicine. Functional medicine is often called root cause medicine because we look for the underlying cause of health concerns. As a result, nurses practicing functional medicine are able to offer powerful guidance for their patients to experience true healing. I personally feel that functional medicine and holistic nursing are essentially one and the same, and I love being able to help nurses provide clarity to their patients in our oftentimes confusing healthcare system. The Functional Medicine for Nurses course is a continuing education course, and it's 12 weeks long. In each module, we explore a new topic in functional medicine, but in the language of nursing, which makes this course very unique. Our partnership with IFM makes it possible to provide many additional tools and resources for our RN and NP students. You can learn more at www.inursecoach.com.
Now back to our podcast.
And that has brought me so much joy too, and has really been just as much of a healing journey as doing the nurse coaching program. The work in itself is so healing for me to be able to support my fellow nurses in that way.
I would imagine so. And it's amazing how no one really understands the ins and outs of a day on the job of a nurse like another nurse.
Right. Yeah.
Right. We don't have to explain ourselves so much. There's so much energy that we have to put out in order for like an everyday person, with an everyday person, have them understand do and what we experience and what we witness on a daily basis. So this being, you're a nurse and you are supporting other nurses, the conversations must be fascinating and quick, like not quick as in speedy, but you're getting to the heart of the conversation much easier and smoother because you understand what they're going through.
Absolutely. And after the pandemic, it's become very clear that a lot of nurses are struggling with their mental health and from the trauma of the pandemic in itself. And a lot of nurses are struggling with maybe sobriety or, drinking too much as a coping mechanism. And not even just nurses, people in my private practice too, that I think that kind of became pretty clear that people were not coping the best, right? So that's been a joy too, to support my private clients and my debriefing clients through that journey too, exploring sobriety, exploring the trauma that they've been through, and addiction too.
Mm-hmm. And a safe space in which to do that. Yeah. What are you seeing related to sobriety or use of substance within the healthcare space?
I think that it's still a pretty taboo subject. We are, as nurses, we are, held to high standards, not only with the nursing board, but also just in the public eye, right, as professionals. And I think it's still kind of taboo to admit, like, hey, I, am drinking too much or using substances, or, I'm struggling. And I think there's more of us than, I think these conversations, the more we open them up, you start to realize that you're not alone, right? And that you can find a safe space to start to explore healing from that.
Yeah. Yes. And we're creating these safe spaces in all different kinds of communities to have the conversation. And truly, when you do show up for these, whether you're a participant or whether you're a facilitator of them, opening up these avenues for people to contemplate, to self-reflect, create self-awareness, then we all are healing through that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And letting go of, and, guiding my private clients and debriefing clients through letting go of shame around that, because I think there's a lot of shame, attached to if you have a problem drinking or with drugs or whatever, and struggling to get sober, or if you've had a relapse. I think there's a lot of shame around that.
Yeah, there is a lot of shame. Yeah. Like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Shoulds, all those shoulds. We're too shoulded.
Yeah.
Yeah. However, opening up this conversation and creating the spaces to do so. Like, for example, at my facility, I started healing circles, and each month we do a healing circle. It's just for nurses gathering together in person and creating that space so that you can come. And it is a safe space. Like, as a nurse coach, we're creating these safe containers, some framework around that to support it so that it doesn't become just a complaining session. It is really directed towards the healing and the conversation surrounding that. So tell us a little bit about how you create those safe spaces for nurses to come together.
So like I talked about, I use a couple of different tools. I use the emotional freedom technique and NLP and hypnosis. And like I said, I was just blown away once I started nurse coaching, and my eyes were just opened up to like all the really cool things that nurses were doing and how you could integrate them into your nurse coaching practice. And I really love the, somatic piece of it and beginning to support your nervous system. And that has been the biggest tool for me, myself, my own healing journey. And is why I'm so passionate about bringing that to my clients, is learning to regulate my nervous system, learning to gain new tools to, really create a new baseline, right? Like a new way that we respond and create new neural pathways, and giving my clients new tools to take on whatever's coming at them, right? So that's been my passion, is really, kind of leaning into somatic work, nervous system work, subconscious work with my clients. And it's just super neat that I get to do it all as a nurse coach. Like I said, never imagined that my nursing career would kind of go in this direction. And it's awesome.
So awesome. You spoke to regulating the nervous system, and I would love to just tap into that a little bit. So I know a lot of nurses are interested in this kind of work, maybe don't know where to begin to learn more tools that they can help their clients with.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you discover this, and just kind of give us a background on that?
Yeah. So for me, learning that a lot of the root of my own problems, using alcohol to cope, and even coping just with on my trauma healing journey, I started to realize that I really was struggling with my nervous system, right? That I had spent my whole entire life in this chronic state of fight or flight. And when I started to learn more about how you can start to rewire those patterns in your brain and in your body, I was blown away. And as you start to learn these different tools, you really start to change your whole life, right? And that's what I do with my clients too. So I worked with another coach that I learned those skills from, the EFT tapping and NLP and hypnosis, and I got certified through her with those skills, and then just brought them into my practice. So I have a couple specialty packages with debriefing the front lines. And so I have a EFT tapping package, I have a timeline therapy NLP package that I do. And then I also kind of just use it organically if I have a client, both my private clients and debriefing clients. If I have a client that I think they could benefit from one of those tools, I bring it up and say, hey, would you be opening to trying this? And the answer is either yes or no. And we kind of go from there.
Yeah. And it's just another tool you can pull out and suggest it. If the client doesn't want to try it, then off to in another direction, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So great. You mentioned about the shame that we can experience. And I feel like in nursing, we try to hide a lot of that. Like we try to hide ourselves. We have been voted the most trusted and most ethically sound profession for the past 20 years or something, right? Ethically sound and most trusted. I mean, that's a high stakes feeling. And here, many of us are coping to numb. We're trying to numb some of these intense feelings that we're experiencing because we've experienced traumatic things at work and in life, in our personal lives too. I mean, those go hand in hand. So when speaking to shame and speaking about that and uncovering that, what ways do you find help people to acknowledge it and open up to being able to express and talk about shame?
That's a great question. So I think that really through my work with debriefing the front lines, and I think language is very powerful. So when I started working with this nonprofit, we focus a lot on cumulative caretaking trauma, which is the repeated exposure to traumatic events in short periods of time, right? And they all start to bleed together and bleed into our personal lives. And then we can't differentiate where one is beginning and one is ending, right? An example for me would be experiencing personal trauma, losing my mom and sister, then trauma at work, working in a very busy ICU, high acuity ICU. And then it all starts blending together. And my coping mechanism was, drinking and using, right? Symptoms of cumulative caretaking trauma are, shame, guilt, anxiety, grief, right? And I think that once I started to learn that language, I realized that it had been something I'd really suffered with my whole life. And through nurse coaching and all the tools that I learned in my nurse coaching program, I was able to, start to guide my private clients and my debriefing clients through that process where I think, again, just opening up the conversation, and making people feel like they're less alone, whether it's nurses or my clients I see in my private practice. they really just want to feel seen, heard, and validated, right? And not feel alone.
Yeah, I just was thinking about how California has normalized, like, we should be taking a break, right? So they're normalizing it, they're putting it into effect by having break nurses, and they put this process into place.
Mm-hmm.
And so really, in essence, nurse coaches are creating these safe spaces, environments to normalize talking about shame, talking about grief, talking about loss, talking about suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And these are normal experiences that we are feeling. And to be able to talk about them helps us to let go of some of those deep-seated feelings that we have instead of stuffing them down, you know?
Yeah, and that's why I love doing subconscious work via hypnosis and timeline therapy, is because you can really dive into releasing the shame and guilt and grief at the subconscious level and start to release it because it's not serving us, right? And then creating new narratives, new nervous system responses, new beliefs, essentially.
Yes. New beliefs instead of the same patterns that the reel that you were talking about at the beginning. I just went in to press play on that reel that I've had for years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so this work, the work you're doing, really is helping with creating the new neural pathways so that we can instead choose maybe to pick a different reel instead of the one that's not serving us.
Yes. And I love it too, because you can really practice this at any age. I've had, clients. I had one private client that was in her late 70s, and she was really willing to do the work and, use the EFT tapping. And we did hypnosis and did all the things. And I just thought it was so neat that this woman in her late 70s was open to trying something new and creating something new for herself in her 70s. It was amazing.
Yes. And never too late.
Never too late. Yeah.
Never too late. Yes. Everyone has a day one.
Yes.
Sometimes the day one is the best day because it's like, whoa, I can change some of these patterns. I can show up for myself in this way.
Yes. And I really love giving my clients too teaching them tools that they can use on their own in their daily life to keep that momentum up, right? To help them continue to change their own life, empower them to change their own life.
Yes. Very important. And the exposure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Many of us have never been, especially in nursing. I've noticed in my work with nurses, they've never really been exposed to these different healing modalities.
Mm-hmm.
And us stepping in and sharing it with them is life-changing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I have to ask a little bit about your Instagram account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So for our listeners, you can find Kacie at whole.soul.recovery. Yes. And you're doing some amazing things. I love following your Instagram account. Very inspiring and very real.
Thank you.
Yeah. So how did you get into understanding Instagram and doing that and seeing that as a platform to share your voice?
So that was a learning curve too.
Right.
Along with learning the business side of nurse coaching. And, social media can be a very powerful way to connect, with other people, with our peers. And then also it's social media, but I think for nurse coaches who are looking to, start their business and whatever that might be, it's free marketing. It's free marketing, and it's up to you. Is the way I look at it is you can create whatever you want, right? I've always been just a very raw, real person. That's just who I am. So, but you can choose how much you share, the ways that you share. I personally, Instagram is my main platform. I don't use Facebook much, or what's the other one? TikTok. I prefer Instagram, but yeah, I just suggest, finding a platform that you like to use, and it's free marketing. That's the way I look at it. So, and it's fun, and it's creative for me. so yeah, I do a lot of my marketing on social media.
And we get to see you at work, see you at different places. And
Yeah.
yeah. And the realities, right? The reality,
Yeah.
the good and the not so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So listeners, you got to follow Kacie. And of course, we're going to share your link in our show notes. So they'll be able to find you there too.
Great. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. So in our last few moments, we'd love to ask the question, what is on your heart that you would love to share with our listeners today?
What is on my heart? Yeah, I think going back to that sense of joy and passion, our careers are a huge part of our life, right? And our identity as a nurse. And nurse coaching has really brought just so much joy back into my professional life. And I'm so grateful for this path and new skills. And I really feel like I'm living my soul's purpose with this work. I always knew I wanted to be a nurse, but nurse coaching really, I feel like this is my soul's purpose. I feel that deep in my heart that this is what I was meant to do, and I love it.
We can tell you love it.
Thank you.
Yes. And I love it too.
Yeah.
We all love it. Yeah. So nurses out there, if you're thinking, how can I support myself? Maybe it's a session with Kacie, right? Maybe it's talking to one of the Integrative Nurse Coach Academy admissions persons to find out more about nurse coaching and how you can go through this program that is transformative, that does support you in different ways. So definitely have a look. Okay, so now we're going to ask some fun questions.
Okay.
So these can be yes or no questions, or they could be and questions too.
Okay.
Those don't have to be ors. All right. So New York or California?
California.
Tell us why.
Probably because my family's all here, and I love I live in the mountains. I love the mountains.
Yeah, not many mountains in New York.
Not yet. I don't know. California is just so versatile. We have the mountains, the ocean, all the things. So
Yes. Okay. How about EFT or hypnosis?
oh, that's a hard one. Probably EFT, just because it's a tool that I can use anytime, anywhere. Personally.
Oh yeah, you can do that anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Safe. You wouldn't want to do hypnosis while you're driving.
Yes. No. No, you wouldn't.
So now we would love to know how we find you. So how can we find you, Kacie?
I think the best place is my Instagram. That's I've got all my links in there at whole.soul recovery, and that's the best way to find me.
Okay, so listeners, hook up with Kacie on Instagram, follow her inspiring work that she's doing with nurse coaching and women throughout the United States, and debriefing the front lines as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and thank you so much for joining us here on the Integrative Nurse Coaches in Action podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.